This is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, a podcast and radio program presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan.
Driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
And now, here he is, your host, Jim Ervin.
Baby, I'm home.
Well, thank you so much, Parker, and welcome to Time Signatures. I'm your host, Jim Ervin, and every now and again, I stumble across some pretty cool people in my travels. Our guest today on this episode is just such a gentleman. We have shared stage space together at the Token Lounge in Westland, Michigan several times, as we are both concert photographers. However, this gentleman is the designated house photographer for the Token, so I always defer to him when I'm in his house. He's a great guy with what I am certain will be some entertaining and informative stories. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you all to a man I consider a friend. Marty Rickard, welcome to Time Signatures. How are you?
Doing good, sir. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to have you on, and got some great shows coming up this year at the Token. Got some good blues shows coming up, and excited to catch some of them with you. But Marty, I want to break the ice here and get things going. Talk about your earliest memories of music.
My earliest, gosh, that goes back a long way. Something a lot of people don't know about me is I used to be a guitar player.
Okay.
Fresh out of high school, I got a job playing with the group, and the first thing we did was fly to California and do the Bob Hope show.
Wow.
So I spent 3 days at NBC Burbank taping that segment, had free reign to the whole NBC complex.
Now, I have to ask you, how did that present itself? How did you guys end up getting that gig?
I used to play guitar in my bedroom all the time as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother dragged me out to see this group. It was a church group, religious group, but they toured nationally. And went and saw them, and the lady that was with us happened to be the church organist. And she happened to ask the director of the band, the guy in charge, she says, "How come you don't have a guitar player?" He says, "We just haven't got one." And she says, "Well, this kid plays." So they invited me out to audition. I spent 3 days with them auditioning, and they invited me to fit in and spent 9 months touring 40 out of 50 states.
Wow.
We kicked it off by flying to Burbank, spent 3 days at NBC doing Bob Hope's show. So I've been around music pretty much my whole life.
That's really, I have to ask you, what was it like? I mean, you were how old at that time?
17. I was young enough. In California, they got strict labor laws, so I couldn't do anything in the studio there until they had a welfare worker come down and make sure I wasn't overworked.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So I spent half a day doing nothing but wandering around NBC.
Now I've got to believe that you had an opportunity to meet Bob.
Yeah, we ended up having to go back for publicity shots of him. Unfortunately, they wanted me to have my guitar around my neck, but they put me on one side and James, our bass player, on the other side because of the guitar necks. And then when they cropped the photo for TV Guide, we got cut out.
Oh, man.
There's absolutely no publicity shots of me in the group at all.
They never sent you a copy of the photos?
No.
Oh.
There is a video on YouTube that shows our performance on the Bob Hope show. You can barely see me in the background.
You're going to have to send me the link because I'll put it up with this episode. I think it's a really cool story, Marty.
Well, the nice thing about it was while I was waiting for the welfare worker to get there, I had free reign to NBC. So we had Andy Williams in the studio next to us. Around the other way was Dean Martin's set.
Oh, man.
So there were three of us that had to wait. And we went down to the Dean Martin set The Gold Diggers were there rehearsing their part.
Wow.
In the hallway, we bumped into Bing Crosby.
Man.
Debbie Reynolds was there doing Andy's show. You know, stars all over the place. And, you know, at 17, matter of fact, nobody remembers back, this is 1969.
Sure.
Back then, Diana Ross did a TV special with the Temptations.
Okay.
They were in the rehearsal hall next to us. So while I'm waiting for, you know, my assigned person to get there, we're just looking through the windows to the rehearsal, hall. I'm watching Diana Ross rehearse.
Wow. Man, that must have been, I mean,
So
like you said,
me being music.
Wow. Well, okay. Let's turn the page now. How about the blues, man? Where did that journey start for you? And did you consider yourself, or I should say, do you consider yourself a blues fan or just a guy shooting pics of the musicians when they flow through the token?
I'm a fan of the music. I don't limit myself to just blues.
That's fair.
With the photography, I got started. I kind of had some help.
Okay.
I happen to know a guy by the name of Alto Reed through where I used to work. And Alto and I became friends. And I bugged him for a long time. Let me come take some photos. Let me come take some photos. And he used to do a lot of stuff between tours of his own music and stuff.
Okay.
So finally, after a couple of years, he invited me out and to take some photos. And ever since then, every time he was in town, hey, I'm playing here. You coming? Yeah. And he just started dragging me around to where everyone got used to seeing me wherever Alto was. He recorded a solo album with a guy from Canada, Steve Dickinson. We were down at Harmony Park Studios. He says, come on down to the studio, bring your camera. Heck yeah. So the idea was, after that first round of photos, he wanted the album to include a lot of the photos of him in the studio.
Okay.
The producer of the album didn't take it that way. I mean, Alto, his conversations with me, we weren't pleased with the whole project. It worked out okay, but the title of the album was, Reed Dickinson. Looking at it on the music shelf, nobody had any idea that was Alto Reed. So there were some problems with it.
Wow.
But it was the first album that I got name credit on the album. So he just kept dragging me around. And then when Bob went back on tour, this is back 2006.
Okay.
He says, you're coming to the shows, right? I says, I got to get a ticket. He says, I got the ticket for you. You coming? So as many shows as I went to with Bob with Alto, I never sat any further than the first 5-6 rows back from the front.
Wow.
And always had after show passes, to go hang with everybody. So it's funny. 2011, when Bob went back on tour, a lot of the guys were coming into town for rehearsals. So I was working at a rental car agency at the airport. So when the guys flew in, they'd be renting cars. And I had a guy come up to I was working the exit booth, guy come up to the window with, driving a car.
Mm-hmm.
I'm processing his rental. It happened to be Dave Brewer, the drummer. I looked at him, I says, can I ask you a question? He says, yeah. I says, what do you do for a living? He says, I'm a drummer. I says, okay, I thought so. He says, Bob's rehearsal started earlier today. You're late. He says, how the heck do you know that? Oh,
Oh man.
a lot of the guys needed rental cars when they were here for rehearsals. So everybody in the band,
Sure.
you got to go see Marty. So I was hooking them all up with their rentals every time they were in town.
Wow. Well, I want to flip the page back just for a second
Okay.
here. We're going to go back to the Token Lounge. I do want to talk a little bit more about Alto and your relationship with him, but we were talking about the Token Lounge. How did you happen to have the opportunity to work at the Token and with John Anton and the gang down there? How long have you been serving as a house photographer?
That's been going on since about 2021, somewhere there, before COVID started.
Okay.
I knew Kim Nakashian.
Yeah.
Her and I worked together I used to do photos for Dick Wagner also.
Okay.
And then when he passed away, we did 3 benefits for his charity, Remember the Child. And I was brought in to do photos for those. And Kim worked with that also. So we knew each other from that.
Sure.
So she was helping John Anton book some shows at the Token and talk John into, hey, I know this photographer. We ought to, let him photograph the shows. Great publicity, get
Sure.
pictures out there, so that's how I got in there.
Very
So
cool.
I get to pick whatever shows I want to do. I don't care for a
Yeah.
lot of the tribute bands, but the name personalities that come in, I'll go.
And what a lot of people don't understand about the Token Lounge is in the Metro Detroit area, it is, in my opinion, and for my money, the creme de la creme. I mean, you guys bring some big
They
names in there.
they have a long history of booking shows, and John
Yeah.
does a great job at bringing them in.
Yes, he does. Yeah, I catch myself when I'm down there walking around looking at the wall and catching all the different musicians that are up there. But
Photography has always been a big thing with the Token, as you
yeah.
say, by the photos on the wall. Mark, I know the guy that did all those photos from
Okay.
early days on, and I don't have any of my photos on the wall yet there, but working on something.
Okay.
Got some
Well, they
ideas
should,
going.
for goodness sakes. Yeah.
Well, there's
But
so much on the walls already.
it is amazing for anybody that has not been to the Token Lounge. You can walk, and this is 350 people easily in this venue.
Yeah,
Um,
I can't think what the total capacity is.
it's a fairly large room, and with an equally large stage, and all the way around on the walls are these photos of, these musicians that have played there,
Yeah.
and it's really cool. But Marty, I want to ask you, speaking of your work, having captured so many photos of legendary rock and blues musicians, have you had any favorites along the way?
There's a lot of them that I really enjoy seeing and being able to photograph. Jimmy McCarty, local guitar player, a
Hmm.
legend in Detroit. I enjoy photographing him every chance I get. I actually have one of his solo albums. The cover photo is one that I did.
Very
So
nice. Congratulations.
that's kind of cool. I can't remember the name of it, but we can look it up later.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Go ahead.
so I always love seeing him. Derek St. Holmes is one. I got to meet him through the Dick Wagner charities. He came in for all the shows. So he's fun to be around.
Okay. How about let's flip the coin here. Any musicians that were less than friendly to you or even downright rude?
I can't say rude. There's been one or two that had the old thinking of trying to limit the photographers.
Yeah.
Um, Great story. Eric Gales, when he played there, his wife at the time was kind of just managing him. She now plays drums for him, but
Okay.
she talked to me and a couple other photographers that were there that night. Says only the first three songs,
Wow. Really?
and by the end of the third song, I've been doing this a long time, so I don't get an attitude with anybody. I just okay, no big deal. She came up to me and she just keep shooting.
Very cool.
So I ended up shooting the whole show. So that's been the way it's worked for me. I'm not shy around personalities like that. I've been doing it my whole life.
Sure.
So I don't get intimidated by them. They're just another person like you and I.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and so that just changes how you approach them. And that makes a difference, I've found, in how they react to you.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
I don't think,
Go
even
ahead.
as I don't think of myself as being anyone special. I've just been lucky my whole photo life, to where everybody enjoys my photos. So they let me do what it is I do.
Yeah. Well, speaking of your photos, one of my favorite photos that you took, I believe it was last year when Walter Trout was there. There's a fantastic shot that you have of him playing side by side with Brett Smith Daniels. Now, Brett is the young man that he has playing guitar with him on tour. I've actually had a chance to speak with Brett after Walter's show in Lansing last summer, and his favorite photos of mine were the photos of he and Walter playing together. He
Yeah.
fully understands the importance of the work that he does with Walter, but he has such a deep respect and esteem for him, and he really understands the value of the teacher and the student relationship.
There's a lot to learn from these guys. I
Yeah.
enjoy when those that have been in the business a long time, Walter, Papa Chubby, there's a lot of them that I enjoy seeing because they still played their old guitar, their Fenders
Yes.
and Strats from the 60s.
Yeah.
They're beat up as all get out, but knowing what I know about Fender and even Gibson, the history of those companies, the wood that was used to make those guitars back in the 60s is a lot different than the wood today. You don't get the same tone quality out of the
Right.
wood.
Right.
So I enjoy the heck out of it. When I see an old beat up guitar, I'm always asking them, what year is that? So
Yeah.
it takes them by surprise because nobody ever pays attention to their guitar. But
Yeah.
I do.
I
I
Yeah, I remember when Walter was in Lansing, he talked about that guitar and playing with the Blues Breakers and Canned Heat, and I'm like, man, if that
yeah.
guitar could talk, the stories that it could tell.
Oh
But
yeah.
I have to ask you, Marty, has the work that you've done at the Token led to other opportunities at other venues as well?
Um, can't say that it has.
Okay.
Um, it gets noticed on social media. Um, but it hasn't. Most of the musicians will let me know when they're playing somewhere else. Mostly the Detroit musicians. So
Okay.
they'll say, "Hey, I'm playing here. If you want to show up, that'd be great." Um, One of those. I mean, I don't shoot just blues or rock and roll. I do a lot of photography for jazz flute player Alexander Zanjik. He
I've been peeping your website and I actually or your Facebook and I've seen that.
He called me a bunch of years ago and says, "Hey, I've got this new album coming out, and there's a photo you took of me that I want to use on the inside of the album." So we did that, and he says he just started saying, come on out and shoot anytime you want. So he considers me part of his work family. All his band members, know me, and it's become common knowledge that I'm his photographer. So when he plays, I show up, and it's no big deal. They know I'm there. I get whatever I need. So I don't limit myself to one kind of music. I just love the music, all of it. Growing up as a kid, I listened to a lot of rock and rolls. I'm old enough to remember the Beatles on the old Ed Sullivan Show.
Yep.
I got interested in jazz when I first heard Pat Metheny, his first albums, and then Al Di Meola. That was, that took me in a strange direction on guitar. So my love of music spans a wide variety. As a young teenager, I got interested in guitar because of classical guitar. I saw a TV show with Andre Segovias. I thought, that is cool. So I taught myself to read and write for classical guitar. At one time, I could read and write for full orchestra.
Wow.
Just taught myself how to do it. Haven't done it in a long time, so it'd be a challenge now. But I can still play guitar, but I know so many great guitarists in this area that there's not much I can add or contribute to the community, but I can take photos of them.
There you go. Now, Marty, I want to return to Alto Reed for a minute.
Okay.
Because you and I have shared some really great stories backstage and before the doors open over there. And I always enjoy your stories because you tell them with a twinkle in your eye. And the one story that I remember, you talked about a friendship that you had developed outside of your work with Alto just a little bit, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I knew his daughters, his fiance, Christiana. I still hear from her every once in a while.
Wow, nice.
But like I say, every time he was in town doing any performances, it was automatic. You coming? Yeah.
And I'm sure there was plenty of opportunity to meet Bob along the way.
I've never met Bob. Bob is
really,
he gets off stage and he's shy. The rest of the band knows me, and they're like brothers and sisters. But Bob, he gets off stage, he puts the hoodie up over his head. The security guy ushers him out, makes sure none of us see him.
So even the after concert parties and stuff like that, you never got a chance to talk to him?
Never got a chance. Now, I will tell you, here's a fun story.
Sure.
Years ago, Bob's photographer, Tom Weschler, along with Gary Graff, did a book called Traveling Man. It was kind of a history of Seger on tour, and it lists everybody that's played with him. So when the book was released, Alto came into town to sit in with a Seger tribute band. So I got a copy of the book at that party. Of course, Gary Graff and Weschler signed it. And somewhere there's a picture with me, Alto, and Doug Podell. Alto signed in my copy of the book.
Very nice.
And that book, when Bob went back on tour, I made up my mind, I need to get everybody I can to sign this.
Sure.
So I was running a card to Jim Moose Brown. I don't know if you know Jim. He's the guy that wrote It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere.
Yep.
Big name in Nashville. He's worked with anybody and everybody in Nashville. So I got him to sign my book, and he says, "Are you trying to get everybody?" I says, "That's my objective." He says, "How about if I take the book with me on tour?" He says, "When you coming to, what show you coming to next?" I says, "I don't know. I know there's a bunch that I'm coming to." He says, "How about if I take the book with me on tour and I can get almost everybody to sign it for you?"
Wow.
I have one of few copies that has been signed by all the current members, as well as some old members.
Very nice.
I know I'm one of two books that Charlie Martin has signed.
That's quite a keepsake.
Yeah. There's still a
Wow.
few that I haven't got to sign it, but
Did Bob sign it?
I kind of twisted Alto's arm to get Bob to sign it. So my copy is signed by Bob.
How cool is that?
I have a copy of the CD DVD disc from Face the Promise that Alto gave me, signed by him and Bob.
Very nice.
The 2011 tour, the band all had hoodies with the big girl and the bullet on the back, and then Seger Silver Bullet Band logo on the front that Alto signed down the middle of the back. And so I have his hoodie from the 2011 tour.
Very cool. Very cool.
It's funny, he'd come in to return the rental vehicle, and people in the lobby would recognize him. And, is that who I think it is? Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, Marty, for true fans of your work, folks have got to know that you have a really good eye for shooting concerts at the Token. Despite the issues sometimes with the lighting, which is it's good, but it's really powerful in some areas of the stage.
It's getting
but
better.
Yeah, but you've done an exceptional job of capturing some flat out incredible photos too.
Yeah. When I first started there, I used to bug John all the time. You need more front lighting. I says, most of the lighting is from the back, so everything's in silhouette.
Right.
I got to play a lot of games photographically so you can see the artist in their face.
Yep.
So he has changed the lighting a lot, and a couple of times, he's mentioned to people, it's Marty's fault, that the lighting has changed. But he understands that, lighting can make or break a show.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest with you, the lighting that we have up front now comes across from the left and right of the stage for people that don't know.
Two lights on each side.
Yep. And it's white. It's not colored. It's white.
Yeah. They're capable of some color. Sometimes they tint blue.
Okay.
But most of the time they're white, adding front fill. And I use those on the sides. When the artists come up to the front of the stage from the side, I can get a nice silhouette with rim lighting on them. That's one of my specialties.
Yep.
I've got, you'll have to go through my Facebook page and pull some photos to pop up on screen if you're able to do that.
We're actually, with your permission, we'll put your link up there so people can come and check your page out, follow you or whatnot, and check out your work. Because I have to say, I mean, I do a pretty damn good job of photography. I've only been shooting concert photography a few years myself, but I really like some of the stuff you do, and you're, it's your house. I mean, you're very creative. You understand the nuances of the light, and you look for those areas when the musicians come out or the singers come out, and you just know right where to go. And, I'm still discovering some of that stuff, but it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, I've been there long enough. I know what the lighting is going to do.
Yes.
I know what I can do with that lighting.
Yep.
So I know how to position myself. Sometimes, they'll ask me, you want a chair up front? If it's crowded, I may, it's easy to add one more chair up in the front row. so I can get up front to take photos. Most of the time I like floating because I like getting different angles from both
Yes.
sides of the stage.
Well, it's funny. I'll
Everything,
I'll be on
everything.
one side and I'll look and I'll see you on the other, and then I'll move to a different spot and you're moving to a different spot, and it's just this dance all night. We just share
Yep.
the space around the stage, and it's a lot of fun. But aside from the concert work, you also have done some really cool shoots outside of the token with your traveling partner and brother. You have any really great stories, some fun stories from those adventures?
My brother and I were separated for a long time, and that's a whole story of itself. But we reconnected a bunch of years ago,
Hmm.
and he found out through our talking that I did photography. And he says, "You ever do the national parks?" I says, "Yeah, but anymore, now that I'm retired, technically retired, I haven't done that much." He says, "Would you do it again?" I says, "In a heartbeat." He says, "I'll pay for the gas. Let's go."
Wow.
So he and I we did Yellowstone, Tetons, Grand Canyon, a few others I can't think right offhand. He had COPD, so he struggled to
Hmm.
breathe, but it was amazing. I mean, walking around Yellowstone, he'd have his walker, and I'd be ahead of him, and I'd stop every once in a while, give him a chance to catch up. I'd look back, he'd just be smiling away. He was loving it as hard as it was for him.
Yeah.
You know, he loved it being out there. It didn't matter that he'd have to stop and catch his breath. But he eventually got to where doctors said, "I don't want you traveling anymore." There's nothing I could do for him if he had any kind of attack.
Yes, sir.
And being too far away from civilization, that just wasn't a good idea.
Now, I know you lost him a couple of years ago.
A
How,
year ago, February.
a year ago, I'm sorry. How has that loss affected your passion to shoot and travel, Marty? Now, I know at one point you actually talked about not traveling any longer, but you've opted to keep going, didn't you?
Yeah, it's something he wanted me to do. With his passing, he left to me. He says, "Travel, have fun, do it." So that's what I'm going to do. I know I've struggled with the concert stuff because it can be physically challenging at times, depending upon the
Sure.
stage and everything. But he left me in a position where I can now afford to do whatever I want as far as the travel. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got his hat that he used to wear that sits on top of the seat next to me, and I'll just go. I'm
It's
actually going
cool.
down to Big Bend here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's a cool legacy, isn't it?
Yeah, I have all his camera gear now,
Yep.
which
But
for
rumor
him,
has it, go ahead. Go ahead.
he had given me his camera and his big lens some time ago, but he kept one camera at home and a bunch of stuff just in case he wanted to do something. But he never left the house the last year of his life. He just he struggled every day trying to breathe,
Yeah.
and I mean he was down to just skin and bones when he finally passed. And but looking back on it, I think he knew what he was doing when he let himself go into that position. He had a friend, he lived in Kalamazoo, a friend of his that he met was helping take care of him, acting as kind of a caregiver. But as it turns out, Gary, this friend of his, passed away 3 weeks before my brother did.
Oh, wow.
So last year, he called me and says, "Gary passed away. I'm going to need your help." I says, "No problem. I'm there." So I went out there, and the first thing he did is, "This is my will. do I need to change anything? Because it's only you and Gary in the will. I says, well, by default, with his passing, I don't think we need to change anything. So we were going to watch the Super Bowl last year together.
Mm-hmm.
I sent him a message. Hey, I'll be out there such and such a time. He never responded. So I get out there Super Bowl Sunday and I find him in bed. He hadn't used his little breather for 3 days, hadn't eaten in 3 days.
Oh, wow.
And I says, HR, this ain't good. I said, I got to take you to the hospital. He says, there's nothing they can do for me. Which realistically, true, all they could do is make him comfortable.
Sure.
So we talked for about an hour and I finally convinced him, let me call an ambulance and get you to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So I got him to the hospital and sure enough, the doctor says, all I can do is make him comfortable. And looking back on it later, I figured he knew what he was doing.
Yep.
He knew the challenge it was going to be for me to come out there from this side of the state to go to that side of the state to take care of him.
Yeah.
And he didn't want that. So I think he purposely set it in motion for him to pass. He lasted a week in the hospital, but we never talked about him passing. It was always, when you get home, we need to get you a new recliner.
Mm-hmm.
Got to do this, got to do that. And he even told the nurses, I don't think I'm quite ready to die. But we never really talked about that. It was always when you get home from the hospital type conversation.
Right.
And like I say, a week after I got him into the hospital called me and says, he's gone.
But you got such a cool batch of stories. And I always enjoy watching when you travel about. And one of my favorite photos that you ended up with was at the Mackinac Bridge with some blue ice, which I've never shot yet. But you had something else in there, didn't you?
I think that's the header on my page right now. Mm-hmm. That's actually a composite.
Okay.
The bridge and the ice is from one shot. The northern lights above the bridge is from a second shot.
It's still a great shot. I love it.
When I first posted that, I got a lot of comments, is this real or is this a composite? And I just let it go for about 3 days to keep everyone guessing.
Yeah.
I finally said, it's a composite. It's a daytime shot of the blue ice and the bridge, and then a nighttime shot of the northern lights.
And if you've never seen blue ice, it is one of the coolest things. And like I said, I have not seen it. I've not shot photos of it. There's a certain part on the west side where it doesn't go, I want to say, is it Muskegon? It does not, you don't see blue ice south of Muskegon or one of those West Michigan's towns.
It only builds up in certain areas.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really cool, but
it's incredible to see. And at Mackinac, with the way the water flows there, it just, big chunks of ice pile up, and it reminds me of the old ice castle from the movie Superman.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my brother was actually with me when we did a bunch of photos of the blue ice last time.
Very nice.
2017, I think.
Very nice. Well, you as you said, you've got some plans to do some traveling. What's on your docket this year? You're going to hit some more national parks?
Yeah, well, I know in a couple of weeks I'm going out to Texas for Big Bend. Okay. Middle of March is a lunar eclipse.
Yes.
So I'm going to photograph that over one of the famous canyons of Big Bend. The last solar eclipse, I went out to Utah to capture that over a Valley of the Gods.
Yep.
Which is kind of cool. So I like doing that stuff. I love doing night photography.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a challenge, but it can be really rewarding if you get it right.
Yeah. And the northern lights are always, you know, great to see and photograph.
Yeah,
In the
oh yeah.
last couple of years, there's been 3 great events that
Yes.
it has just been awesome out there, and you can't get enough of it once you first experience it.
Yeah, it's an incredible experience. I remember when we used to live up north back, oh gosh, this was before my kids were born. And man, we get out there up around the Cadillac Lake City area. We were living out in the
Yeah,
country, and I'd never seen so many stars in my life. But we
yeah.
were far enough north that we got the northern lights pretty regular up there. And it's a just one of those things that, and that was before I had my camera, so I wasn't able to get photos of it. But um, speaking of your photos, Marty, if
Okay.
you'd like to put your information out there, where can people go to see your photography?
Just on Facebook. I don't do a lot of social media. Over the years, I've been with the artists that I photograph, I've been protective of those photos. Not much
Hmm.
I can do with them without their permission. So I just, to make it simple, have avoided a lot of that.
Okay,
Of course, I've always made them available to the artists,
sure.
and there's quite a few albums out there that have my photos on them now as a result. Um, some big names that I had a picture of Dave Brubeck when he played the Detroit Jazz Festival.
Okay,
His sons are musicians also. And I happen to have a picture of Dave and his son Chris, who plays bass, walking off stage with their arms around each other. And Chris happened to see that on social media, and he emailed me, messaged me, called me, sent me every CD the Brubeck brothers have done, all signed,
wow,
and stories about them, trying to get the
wow.
picture. It ended up, they had an album called Lifetimes. It was #1 on the jazz charts for a couple of years. Well, that was 2010, I think.
Okay,
So that ended up the back cover of that album. Like I say, Jimmy McCarty used one of my photos. Bobby Murray has used my photos on an album. Dick
we are
Wagner
uh,
used one.
we are really fortunate here in the state of Michigan because there's quite a few musicians that I think rise to the level of any of the national touring acts, but they're more local, like Jim McCarty and like Bobby
Yeah,
Murray, who played for
Etta James.
Etta James band for years, what 20 years, I
23
believe.
years.
Yeah, and we're really fortunate to have the the level of musician quality that we have here. That's for sure.
It's unbelievable the musicians that are in Detroit
It is really.
in all genres.
Yeah.
Like I say, you know, through Alexander Zonjak, jazz flute player, I've met a lot of big name jazz people.
Okay.
You know, what was it? A year ago, Stanley Clark came in to do the Jazz on the River, and I was the only photographer there. Of course, I had my connections to get in, so I got to meet Stanley Clark
Very nice.
and photograph him. There's big names. Bob James when he was in town years ago, I got to photograph him.
Do you ever get a chance to shoot Tim Cunningham?
No.
Okay. Tim's brother is Freddie Cunningham, the founder of the Root Doctor band here in Lansing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I actually I need to get in touch with Tim because Tim said he would come on. He was just inducted into the Hall of Fame at his his high school here in Lansing, and I actually sponsored the program that they handed out and put a congratulatory message in there. But I never did follow up and get the interview. So that's something that I definitely need to do. But Marty, I want to thank you very much for your time, my friend.
Hey,
I've really
great.
enjoyed our visit today, and Look forward to working with you again around the Token Lounge stage or maybe somewhere else.
You never know.
Always
The,
traveling. Who knows?
You'd be surprised where I've been and run into somebody I know.
Indeed. All right. Well, that wraps up this edition of Time Signatures. Once again, my thanks to our guest, Marty Rickard, but also to you, for without you, none of this would be possible. Jim Ervin reminding you that keeping the blues alive is everyone's responsibility, but preserving the history of the blues, one story at a time, that's my mission. Until next time, so long, everybody.
This has been Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. For more information on cabs, visit capitalareablues.org. You can find this episode and past episodes at lccconnect.org. The Time Signatures theme song, Michigan Roads, is used by permission and was written by Root Doctor, featuring Freddie Cunningham.
You know I'm trying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
Until next time, keep on keeping the blues alive.